All right. Well, yeah. Wait. You don't care about my face. You care about this stuff. You care about this stuff. You care about my screen. That's why we're here. It's COMP125. Welcome back, and it's summer 2018 semester at Centennial, and we are week 11 already. Whew, right? Today I want to talk about jQuery and AJAX. Very little jQuery, more AJAX. And the reason why I wanted to do this is because we have an assignment 3 that's due, right? This week, right? At the end of the week, right? If I'm not wrong. Is it the end of the week this week? Or is it? No, it's not. It's today. No, I'm joking. Yeah, so we got lots of time for that one, August 3rd. But I want to talk about how to read data from files. We did that last week a little bit more. I need to spend more time with doing that, and then if I can tomorrow, I'd like to, like I said, hit node if I can. You have to create your own file called paragraph.js. Yeah. So let's take a look at that. So we have our. Let's just drag in our file. So last week, let's get these away. Last week we were 10. Here it is. And we're going to make this. We're going to make a copy of this one just like we normally do. And I'm going to paste in here this new version 11. And again, I'm doing this to keep them separate. So you have kind of, instead of making one file, that's the reason why. I mean, some people have asked, why don't you just make it in one folder and just add everything? Well, couple things. One, I don't like doing that because it's not realistic in terms of a project. I want you to think about all these things as separate projects, right? And in reality, what you'd be doing is you would probably set them up as maybe branches, but I think it's cleaner if I just have separate repositories. That's why I do it. So that's kind of the answer to that one. I know people ask about that. Again, here I'm going to do git init. I'll be okay. Git add dot git commit -m and initial commit. You see that keeps going as I'm talking. Now I want to connect to a service. So let's go to GitHub and we'll look at Centennial. And in Centennial, we'll make a new repository like we always do called COMP125 Summer 2018 Lesson 11. And that's the one we're going to connect to. Again, I'm just going to grab these last 2 bits of code here just to make it quick and enter, and we're good. We're connected to a repository. That's how it should be for you at this point. Now, at week 11, you should be fairly comfortable creating repositories, connecting to GitHub, all that kind of stuff. There should be no issues with that, all right? And if you still have issues with creating repositories and stuff, you got to get over it because we're almost at the end, right? We don't have a few more. Good. Pushing to stuff, then that means that you have to practice doing some stuff, right? So making live is a problem too. Okay, so we'll talk about that as well. So again, I've got my lesson 11 now. I'm just going to change a couple things so it says lesson 11. What did we do last week? Even though it says lesson 11, I'm going to run a server. One thing I can tell you is for those people who don't like to run Node, and I'm going to put it out there, there is another extension you can download. And if you look at, if you download something called Live Server, this is something that's come to light recently for me. You can actually use a live server without having to install Node at all, right? Which is kind of cool. That's a new thing. So let's say you didn't install Node and Light Server. We've been using Light Server the whole time. And you wanted to use something called Live Server. What it does is at the bottom of your Visual Studio Code, it provides this little button way at the bottom. And if I click onto it, then what it'll do is it'll pull up a server on port 5500. So there's no, and it's browser synced, which is really cool. So it actually syncs up, no Node.js required, no Light Server, nothing, right? So it's called Live Server. If you're interested, I'm going to still use Light Server because for different reasons, I have more control. But if you go back, you can see that my live reload, that I've got going on is right here. And notice that there's a little button on the bottom of my Visual Studio Code. If I click onto it, then what I do is I dispose of the live server, and I can turn it on and off. I can make it go live really quickly, and when I'm done, if I don't want to do it anymore, I can just click this button here and I can make it go off, right? So kind of turning a server off and on. So kind of a neat thing I found out recently. So that's one. But I'm not going to use that. I'm still going to use my built-in like kind of server that I've been using, light-server. And what we did last week was we used AJAX. We talked about AJAX. It used to be called asynchronous JavaScript and XML, right? No longer. We don't look at it like that. And what we've done is we've used AJAX to load different components of our page. We've got our navbar in a separate component. We have our content in a separate component. And we have in the bottom, we have our footer in a separate component. And then what I did was I can detect which page I'm on virtually. Notice also that I'm controlling the history object. That's what I did last week. This is the last thing we did. And I built out this small single page application using JavaScript. All right. So you can see that it's contact, about, and home, but actually no pages are being loaded. I'm just injecting content into the same index.html through AJAX. Right. So that's really cool. And that's what we did last week. So that's not a bad thing to do, but there are some risks when doing this. I got to talk about the risks a little bit. And if you look at the structure, just to review what we did last week, if I go to my core, I have this app.js. In my app.js, I have this function called insert HTML. Let's do some documentation here to talk about what it does, right? So again, I can use the built-in or the extension document this. And if I do that, I can kind of put in some parameters. It takes in two parameters, a source URL and a destination tag, right? Those are the two parameters. I can also specify the type, right? That's the type in here. So the type for source URL is obviously a string, right? That's what I need. And the type for my destination tag, also a string, right? So that's the string that I'm getting, two strings, right? And now notice that I'm getting, it'll say string and string, right? I can actually kind of document my functions this way. We talked about this, right? And the @param, what I've been doing actually is, this is a documentation standard that I'm using. And what you can do with the documentation that I'm putting is create your own API, right, eventually. So here I want to kind of understand what I'm doing with. So this function inserts HTML from a file, right, or other URL or other location, right? Right, and then into the specified tag or element that must exist on the page, index.html page. So index.html page. Okay, so that's what it does. That's what this little function we wrote did, right? And we use AJAX for this, right? We're using this XHR, which is a XML HTTP request object. That's what this is. And then we actually are listening for this ready state change. We're listening for if the server is, if we find the page we're looking for, the URL that we're looking for, and the ready state is 4, which means we've loaded all the information from that particular URL. And then we're injecting the response text that we're getting, because the response text is the stuff that's coming from the server. And it's being injected into the target, and the target itself is the based on the destination tag that I'm using. I'm using get elements by tag name, and I'm using the destination tag. By the way, what's the other way to do this? Quiz. If I was going to give you guys a quiz tomorrow, maybe I will, right? Here's this one way of querying. What's the other way I can query to get the same result? What's the other way I can do it? And I have a destination tag. That means I got a tag. Get elements by tag name is one way. What's the other way? Not with a tag. I have a tag, right? I'm getting a tag name, right? So what's the other way I can use? If I want to hit a tag, I can't use ID because the ID doesn't exist on the tag. It's just a tag. How else can I get it? There's two ways really that I know. Well, three actually, right? So this is one by tag name, and this gives me elements, and that's why I need to put this 0 in here, right? Because it gives me a collection of tags that matches the tag, whatever I give it, right? That's the first way. The other way is, what if I use query selector, right? So if instead of using elements, I could use, instead of the 0, let's try to see if it works. So undo this. Let's get rid of this. Actually, what I'll do is I'll just comment it out so we can see that this is one way. This is the other way. And I'm bringing this up just as a reminder that there's always more than one way to do something in JavaScript, right? most of the times anyway. So here's let target is equal to this, but I can, instead of doing get element by tag name, I could also do, query selector, right? Query selector is two, query selector and query selector all, right? Query selector, actually, I can pass in any of those things, including tags. So I can say tag name in here, right? So if I say dest tag, then that will do the first destination tag, right? This is what this will be. It'll be an element that I'm looking at, right? And if I press save and I go back to my site, it's the same, right? Because if I look at my inspect thing here, I can see that I've got all my stuff coming through. Here's my contacts. Got my contacts, my three contacts. We're going to fix this in a second. I did this really, really quick last time, and I want to go through this, and I want to show my contacts in a form that's going to appear on my page, but only when I go to my contacts, my contact page. So right now my contact page just says contact us, but my contact page actually is going to have all my contacts this time, just to make it so it's different. It's going to read the JSON file and inject it inside of a table, right? So it's almost like it's going to act like my JSON file is a database. It's kind of like a database, and I'm injecting data from the database in my table, right? That's what it's going to look like. All right, so this works too, right? So query selector is one, and if I can also use, if we're really crazy, query selector all. That's the other way to do it. But this returns an array-like object, a collection, and it's not anymore a element. Notice it's an array or a node list of elements. So what I'd have to do again the same thing we did last time, which is kind of put in that square bracket stuff that looks like this, right? And then if I hover over it, you see I'm getting an element again, right? So query selector or query selector all is another way of doing it. And since we're talking about jQuery today, jQuery, it's like using query selector all the time, or query selector all the time. That's what jQuery does. Okay, so this is definitely another one. I'm just going to go back. So this is another one, another form. We'll comment this out. So I'm going to kind of copy this and comment this one out. That's another way. These are two ways so far. Let's do the other way one more time, which is just the query selector. The query selector by itself. These all produce the same results, by the way. Okay, so that's the third way to do it. And of course, because we're using jQuery today, jQuery, because that's the topic of today, what we can do with jQuery is we can use the $. So jQuery, we've already loaded jQuery. I've already talked about it, but let's talk about it one more time. In order for you to use jQuery, it's just a library. It's a massive library that's been in existence for many, many, many years. Okay, like we're talking about over 10 years, for sure. Okay, so how does it look? If I go back to my page, let's look at the jQuery page for a second. So here's jQuery. So this is the jQuery page, jQuery.com. And if you look, there is a API documentation area. Okay, so if you look at API documentation, it tells you all the basic ways to use jQuery. Now, the problem with this page is you don't know where to start. There isn't a quick start or getting started here. So that's not where it is. And if I go back to my jQuery page by itself, you can see that they have some really simple ways of using jQuery. And there's this $ thing, right? So I want you to think about when you use jQuery, and by the way, this is detailed in your PowerPoint, which I'm not going to go over this week at all, right? But it's for your own reading pleasure. What?
What is a lightweight footprint?
Lightweight what?
Footprint.
Footprint. Yeah, it's a lightweight footprint. Means that you can actually, it's 30 kilobyte minified file. That's why it's lightweight. But you don't need jQuery most of the time. So now I want to show you that. We've actually done everything that you can do with jQuery. We already know how to do. Okay. However, jQuery makes it a little easier. And this is where I'm happy to show you stuff that makes your life easier, right? When it comes to stuff on the web, right? However, it's a little bit more cryptic or less human readable sometimes when I use jQuery, I find, right? Only because it's not as descriptive, the code, right? So this is where I shy away from jQuery. Okay, so then to use jQuery, you have to include it in your index.html or any page, and we've always been doing it here. We've done it from the almost day one. We've had jQuery injected into our page, and the way to do this is there's two real ways to do it. One is through a direct script like this, and the other way is through something called using a CDN, which is the Content Delivery Network. There's a link you can use to access jQuery, and they don't show it here. But if I go to download on the main jQuery website, you can see that I can use directly download by clicking these download links. That's one way. The other way is to use npm or yarn, which we've done. We know how to do that now. So you can use jQuery with thing or Bower. Bower is the older way. Bower is being deprecated soon. And then, of course, if you scroll down, there's also using something called the CDN, and there's a bunch of CDNs that you can access. Oh, that's not here. It's further down. Here's the Google CDN, the Microsoft CDN, and CDN.js, and a bunch of other ones. The CDN is the content delivery network that's offered by these places. So here's my Google CDN. You can see that if I click onto it, there are several libraries you can hook into. So here's 3.x version of jQuery. So you have nothing to download. You just have to include this script inside the head, not the body, the head of your document, right? Yes. But most of the time when we're accessing a website, we are connected to the internet. And for the internet to go down these days, I mean, there's got to be a catastrophe, right? So you're not going to ever be stranded. Most of the times you're not stranded, right? So, but yeah, at one point we were stranded. And you know, there wasn't a thing. And I like to develop without the internet a lot of times. I don't want to depend on the internet to be available to me to do stuff. And that's why I do kind of local development. But the great thing about using a CDN, and I'm talking about it in more depth at this time, is like these little links that you can get for almost any library out there, right? Any more modern libraries. The reason why you want to use this is because, okay, I include 3.3.1 as in a link that's accessing a CDN. It's jQuery. And if your browser already has accessed jQuery before, it's in the cache, which means, guess what? You don't have to download anything, and your startup is faster through the CDN than actually downloading my files from my server locally. So if I have local files, jQuery, through node modules, like I did, it takes longer to load those because every time you access my website, you're downloading my files, right? Whereas in using the CDN, if you've gone there before and it detects you've gone to that place, it doesn't download anything. You're ready to go. It's part of your browser experience, right? So that's really the advantage of a CDN. A lot of it's cached. And because you're using the common version that a lot of other people are using, if they've already accessed the jQuery somewhere, any website that's accessed jQuery, you're going to have access to it. It's much faster, and it's much better and more pervasive. And it also gives you the latest version of jQuery. If you want, you can target certain versions of jQuery just by putting the value of the one you're targeting right in here. So if I want to say, I want to use jQuery 2.2.4, I just put that in here, like it shows here. Right, and so I can target different versions. I don't have to download anything. It's lightweight from that perspective. So that's the second way of getting it. For us, of course, we already have it, so there's no need for us to do this. But that's the way you get jQuery. We have access to jQuery. Now we have to use jQuery. And the main reason why we want to use jQuery is its shortcuts. Shortcuts, the way it can find and manipulate the DOM. So if I go to my API documentation, and if you look at these are all the API docs for jQuery. And also, I also want you to see that if I go jQuery on W3 Schools, I also recommend looking here because W3 Schools actually has a really great tutorial on how to use jQuery. They have a whole jQuery section that includes things like how to do selectors and how to get started with jQuery. Let's look at the getting started piece. How to include it, how to download it using the they talked about the CDN, and there's different CDNs you can use. And they also talk about Jquery Syntax, which is the idea of this $. Okay, so $, and then you have some kind of selector syntax, and then some kind of action you're going to take, which is kind of cool. So let's going back to our code for a second. If I wanted to use jQuery to do the same thing that I'm doing here, I would just use $, right? And then inside the brackets, I could have, I'm querying for an element. So I can look for the destination tag, dest tag, right? So now this part right here is like doing one of these. That's what this is, okay? So I can say, well, this is my destination tag. So I've got this. And once I've got this, I want to have to put, now remember, what I'm getting here is, it's like doing one of these two, okay? I'm getting a collection of things that match this tag, right? So if I say that let target, I would never do this, but let target is equal to this, okay, as an example, and you can see that if I hover over target, I'm going to get a jQuery HTML element. All right. But if I do this, which is equivalent to what I've done over there, then what I'm going to get is if I hover over a target, when it actually tells me what it is, you're going to see it's the same HTML element that I would get over here. So what I'm doing here is I'm using, it's almost like using query selector all. That's what jQuery does. Hey, jQuery, that's the $. Query, find me that element. That's what it does. Okay, but that's not all it does. All right, that's just the main thing. Selecting can be done this way. So this little line here is the jQuery version of how to do this stuff. Exactly the same. There's no difference. And if I press save, as an example, I'm saving my document, and I go back to my page and see if it loads, then you can see that I got the exact same results. No difference, right? And I still can do the same thing. I can still do everything that I did before. So there's no difference with using jQuery compared to using my own code. Why would I want to use my own code? I don't need jQuery for it, right? I'm using jQuery because of Bootstrap, but if I wanted to write an application, I don't need to use jQuery's code to do what I can do with vanilla JavaScript, right? That's the idea behind it. So this is the jQuery version, and I'm going to put that in. So I'm going to say just I can undo that part, and I'll say something like jQuery version. Okay, I want to use one of these though, and I think the easiest way to do this without using the complicated syntax is this one. This is my favorite way of doing it with the query selector, not the get elements by tag name that I first did, because query selector is clear. I'm selecting the destination tag, and I'm making a reference to that in the target. That's the target location, right? Here with the jQuery version, I mean, the problem with it, and this is what I've always had problems with, is context, right? I look at it and I'm like, whoa, what the heck does this mean, right? And I know what it means, right? But it just from a context perspective, I don't know what's happening here. If you were to look at this and if you never knew what jQuery is, you would say, well, what does this $sign mean? And why is this, what's this destination tag doing? And, you know, you'd have to know jQuery. jQuery is a framework, right, that you have to use, a library, actually. You'd have to, you know how to use. So that's what I don't like about jQuery. But what I do like about jQuery is look how small it is. It's this big, right? When I have to do all this, right? This is this big, and this is only a few characters. So can I write it quicker if there's small, less to write? Yeah. That's the advantage. That's one. I don't need it. I don't need it. Because get elements by tag name, right? What it does is it gets elements, and it gets me multiple elements by the same tag, and I'm looking at the first element, right? Here I'm doing the same thing with query selector. It only returns the first element, right, of a group, any elements that match destination tag. Right? And then what I can do is it gets me back an element, right? That's the good thing about this. That's a really cool thing about this. And it does the exact same thing. All right. The other thing that jQuery does really cool is any event listener when it comes to things like click events and that kind of stuff, right? Like notice I have these add event listener, the load events, and somewhere down here I also have a window add event listener load, the load window. I've got a couple of event listeners here, and jQuery actually uses the .on, right, selector. So from an event handling perspective, jQuery is really cool because you can chain your events. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So let's say, for example, I want to hook into something that's inside my index.html. Like, you know what, when I don't know, I want to kind of connect with my main content. In my main content, notice that there's no content here to hook into. It's inside of my views now. In my views folder, in my content folder, I have my, in this case, my home.html. And I want to connect to something that's in my home. It's my home HTML, right? And I want to say something like, well, imagine if there was a button. So I want to kind of say, I want to put a button. There's my button. I will give it a class of button, button primary, right? As an example, button large. I think it's button dash large, right? And in my button itself, remember I'm using Bootstrap, right? I can say that my button is, we'll call it, click me, like we've done before, and we'll give it also an ID. So we'll say the ID for my button is going to be equal to, I don't know, my click me button. We've done this before. Click me button. There's my click me button, right? Yay. And if I go back to my page, you can see that I got a click me button now, right? It's nicely styled with a blue button. It doesn't do anything though, right? But I want to use jQuery to hook into this button. Okay, but what happens when I'm on this page? If I'm on the contact page, does it work? Yes, it would, because guess what? It only exists when the button is there, right? So I can do something like this with jQuery. Really, really cool, right? First of all, I'm going to assume that all this stuff has been done. So I've loaded JSON, and I did some contacts, and I loaded my files and whatever. And then down inside main, so this is my main function, right? And down inside main, just before I exit the function, I want to do this other event handler. I want to kind of do something like, well, hey jQuery, right? Hey jQuery, I want you to find a element with an ID of click me button. Okay. All right, cool. And when you find it, I want to add a click event, and I want to run an event handler, right? When you find this button with that's called click me button, right? You see, I'm doing it all in one, right? And then what I want you to do is I want you to take that button, right? So the button itself, and I want you to change the the CSS on it. So I can go something like $this dot, and I can change the CSS, or I can add a class, or I can remove a class, right? So let's say I can remove a class. Let's do a remove a class. There's my remove class option. And if you notice, what a remove class does is it says I can remove a particular string. So instead of making the button large, I want to remove button large. Let's do that. So I said, so I want to remove CSS. I want to remove a string that's button dash large. I want to remove that. I want to remove that string. Okay, so then remove that class. Okay, so I'll tell you what this does in a second. Okay, so first of all, I wrote this little piece of jQuery. I'm going back and I click on the button, and then notice what happened, right? It kind of transformed. So let me refresh that thing. So for a second. So here's my button. Watch. So I'm hovering over. When I click onto it, something happens, right? Now I'm not getting any errors, which is interesting. So I'm removing button large from my click me button. I can also do other things with it. I can actually change the CSS value altogether. I can remove my attributes. I can also do attribute, right? I can remove attribute. So I can do something like attribute, and it says, what attribute do I want? I can say that my class attribute, I can rewrite it altogether. So I can say that it is a button, button dash, instead of primary, we'll say button dash danger, and then button dash large, right? So if this works properly, then what I can do is I can change the attribute, the class attribute of the button, of this button, to change it to red, as an example, right? If it works, let's see. No. And the way to know that is, I'm probably doing something wrong. But let's take a look at this. I'm going to look at I'm going to do a console log of clicked. We'll say with the button's been clicked. Let's see if that part works, right? Right. So that part's not even working, right? When I'm clicking on the button, I'm not seeing anything over here, because if this function was working, then we'd be okay. So let's make sure we're targeting the right thing. So did I do it right? Let's go into my content. And remember what I'm also doing, I'm doing this piece on its own, and it's trying to find something called click me button, an ID, and all it's saying, hey, jQuery, return all elements with the click me button. Right? That's what I'm basically telling it to do, right? That's what it's saying. It's saying, hey, find all elements with the click me button. And all elements are inside of my home. So there's click me button, right? So it should be able to find this if it's loaded, but we know that we're using AJAX. Remember, AJAX is finicky this way, right? So if I go back to this, we know that we'd have to put this inside of here somewhere, right? Because my add event listener load has got to wait for everything to load in order for me to do everything. If I do it out here, the click me button doesn't exist yet, so it's never going to find it. So if I take this little function, by the way, is anyone freaked out about that or messed up in terms of how that works? Remember, we're asynchronously loading, right? And we're waiting for AJAX to load content from our operating system somewhere, right? It takes time, even milliseconds. And HTML is so fast, right, nowadays, that there'll be a lag, right? By the time you finish downloading, I'm already looking for something that doesn't exist, and so I'm not going to hit anything. If I do it now, and if I click me, you can see that it says clicked and it turns red, right? Because this part here has to be waiting for my XML HTTP object to load, and once it's finished loading all the data, then I can enact my click me button, right? So I don't need this piece. And all I've done here is this is a quick little, 3 lines of code, which you can probably make into 2 lines if you really want, because I can take this little part here and put it over here, right? 2 lines of code that really target the click me button, add an event listener, which is the click event, created a callback function inline in here, target this button, this part here. It says, hey, look at the thing that I'm getting, whatever button I queried. Now I want to access that element, whatever that is, change the attribute of that element to the class attribute of that element to this. Change it completely, right? So that's what these 3 lines of code do. So that's what jQuery is really great for. jQuery is a shorthand. It allows you to manipulate the DOM very, very quickly and efficiently. And it's been tried and tested. It doesn't have a lot of bugs, right? So if you don't want to write a lot of code, and you're already leveraging a library that exists, in our case, we are, because it already exists. We need it for Bootstrap, right? It makes sense that we can use jQuery where it's necessary, okay? However, if you're writing a vanilla project and you don't have Bootstrap, or maybe you don't want to use jQuery because you want to write your own custom code, you want more control, then for whatever reason, then this, you can write it differently. So how would I write this right here with vanilla JavaScript? How would I do this? Well, it would be something like this. It would have to say, I could do it the same way. I could say document dot query selector, right? Query selector, and then I can say click me button. It's the same thing. Click me button. So that's the same part as this part. That's this part, okay? And then I could say, instead of dot click, it would be add event listener on the same thing. I can keep going, right? And just to be clear, I can put this on another line like this. It's not going to hurt me to do this, right? Add event listener, and then I can say the click event, right? So, and then what I can do is I can do a custom function just like I did before, right? And this custom function is in here. And then, so this is this part and this part. That's what I just did. Okay, so it's exactly the same stuff, or exactly the same event. And now I want to target this, right? Well, I know that there is a event object that's in here that is phantom. It's passed in here by default, right? So I can say that event dot current target, whatever the current target of the event is, which is the button, right? So-called this. That's what this is. That's what this part is. This part. That's what this is, right? And then dot, and I can say that I want to change the attribute, right? So set attribute. I can do that. So here's my set attribute. You can't see it right now, but I want to set attribute on this event, and I can do the same thing. I can just copy this part right here. I can take this part and I can put it on here, right? And this, my friends, is the exact same as this. Still, instead of 3 lines, it's 4 lines. And I don't have to leverage a library. Now, let me prove it to you, because you say, "Oh, Tom, I can't. I don't know if you're right." Right? Okay. Let's go. Let's see if it works. Right? So if I'm right, then it'll work. And let's see if I missed something. Maybe I missed something, because I'm doing this off the cuff. So I go back and I click on it, and it's red. Right? Worked to me. Right? And I'm using this. I'm not using this anymore. Right? Same thing. And so, in the past, I would say that the problem with this syntax is some people who are non-developers or who were young developers or junior developers found this syntax cumbersome, right? This is cleaner for them, right? So this part or this part, yeah, this part to me is very descriptive of what's happening, right? However, this part is very fast, right? Because I can write this so quick. Here I have to think about what I'm doing, and I'm doing it all in one. I'm doing all this stuff, the same thing, all in one. But, I kind of can do the same things with vanilla JS, right? So this is where I want to go. I want to kind of write this more often than jQuery. I'm not going to put down jQuery. jQuery is awesome for a lot of really cool things, especially animations and special effects, right? Because you can do a lot of really cool animations that are built into to jQuery that would take a little bit more effort for you to do in JavaScript. It would take a lot more lines of code, right? So again, for those kind of special effects, which by the way, nowadays we can do with CSS, we don't even need jQuery for that, because CSS, back in the day when we used jQuery, CSS2 was in play. There was no CSS3, right? So the next version of CSS came out, and they said, hey, wait a minute, I don't need jQuery anymore. I mean, CSS does it all. It's built into the browser model, right? If it's built into the browser and I can do it with CSS, I would remember the 3 layers. I want to do my structure first. I want to do my presentation next. And that's where all the special effects for animation can come from now. I don't need JavaScript or jQuery. And so it took away a lot of the real reason to use jQuery, for special effects. So these two things are equivalent, or close anyway. They almost do the exact same thing. And there's many ways to do this. I'm not going to say that this is the only way or the best way. There's many ways to do the same thing. Okay, going back to jQuery. So this is the Jquery syntax. Here are the special effects you can use. I'm just looking at the W3 schools. But if you look at the jQuery documentation, there's also an area here called Effects Basics. And you can see that you can hide and show. What is hide and show? It literally is making it, display the CSS. I'm going to display block or display none. That's what hide and show is. All right. But I can do the hide and show part with JavaScript. Like literally, I can go whatever the element is dot CSS and then or styles, right? And I can say display none, and then it's the same as saying hide, right? And if I want to show, display block, right? Go back to normal, and I'm just manipulating the CSS as opposed to doing what this is doing. But the really cool thing about this is take a look at the code here. This is on the jQuery website. It has some callback features. It actually adds some extra stuff. So here I'm targeting whatever the target is, the target class. I'm able to hide the elements, all the elements that meet this requirement. Because remember, I'm not doing Query Selector. I'm doing Query Selector all with jQuery, which means I'm getting an array or an array-like structure, collection of all objects that have the target class in it. And then I'm hiding them all, right? If I only want to hide one, I got to put the square brackets because I'm only targeting that one, the first element or whatever it is, right? So here's an example of that, right? So I want to use the click me function, and I want to hide, and I'm using the click function. This is a callback right here, right? So there's the callback function because I can chain. The good thing about jQuery, just like JavaScript, is I can use chained functions. So I can target something, chain it with a click event, and then I can say that I want to hide. And what I can do when I use hide itself has some special effects that you can put in. It has a timing. So if I look at the hide function, they made it extra special because they can include things like easing. So I can make it so that it hides nicely. It looks like an animated effect, right? It has a bunch of events that you can listen for. For example, progress and complete. When the hiding is done, you can make it do something. When it's done doing it, these are all different kinds of events. There's a duration, an easing, and a complete. These are the 3 functions that you can do. Notice that is the general form of the hide function that comes with jQuery. So the example that they give us is something like this. I want to hide this book, jQuery 1.3, as an example. And if I come here, I can hide an element really quickly, right? Or I can hide these things using some animation. And this is really cool. I can hide each of the characters here, right, by clicking hide to make it look neat, right? But all this is doing is using jQuery to, first of all, target the elements. So I'm targeting all elements that have a span. So all span elements. I'm looking at the last child, whatever that last child is, which means it'll start here. The last child, this is like a CSS syntax, right? So I'm looking at the last span child, which is this one, okay? Actually, it's this one, programmers. And because there's a bunch of spans, right? So this is the last element, the last part of the collection of all spans. So hey, it's like saying this, hey, jQuery, find me all spans on the document. Cool. Make a collection. Now I have an array-like collection, right, from 0 to however many spans, to n, right? I want to say, okay, look at the last span, this one, okay? Cool. Hide it. Hide it, right? And then what's going to happen is Okay, how fast do you want me to hide it? Well, I want it really fast. Okay, and then when it's hidden, what do I want to do next? Well, I want to look at the elements, the span that I'm looking at. That's what this is. So for that particular span, look at the previous span, and hide that one too. And it says arguments.callee, which means go to the arguments that you get. And it basically allows you to do a for each loop for each of the spans, hide. Speaking about for each and looping and all that kind of stuff with jQuery, can I do that? Can I go do a for each? Can I say like, hey, jQuery, find the, click me button, right? And then can I do a kind of a for each? You can't do it here, right? But jQuery has its own for each. So if I say, hey, jQuery, for looping and all that kind of stuff, it'll allow you to do that kind of stuff. It'll actually target what you're getting and then go through it all, right? And again, looking at the documentation here, it's pretty clear all the things that you can do for attributes and callbacks and core. And here's manipulating CSS. So I say I can target CSS. I can add a class. I can change the height or inner width. These are all built-ins that you can access through jQuery. And again, I invite you to take a look at this if you're interested. If you're interested in learning jQuery, all the power to you, right? jQuery also had some other projects. I want to talk about those before I move on from jQuery and back to AJAX. There is this jQuery Ui project, okay? And there's also a jQuery mobile project, all right? So let me talk about jQuery Ui for a second. jQuery Ui is another library that you can download and install in your project. And what it does is it uses jQuery to create effects, but pre-built effects, almost like presets. So I want to do some kind of accordion effect, okay? And it's going to look like this. I want to kind of make the accordion effect look like this. I want to make this effect, right? Well, it's already pre-built. I don't have to build it. It already exists. These are common. These used to be, I'm putting it out there, used to be very common effects. Nowadays, we're like, nah, that's kind of deprecated. I don't like to use my accordions. Unless I'm going to do some kind of weird menu that accordions somehow, right? I have a menu, I have a tree, and I want to kind of show part of the menu but hide the other part when I'm looking at the other part. Okay, maybe that might be okay, as an example. And I have some collapsible content where I hide stuff and I do some animation. Well, there's built-in stuff. I can use the accordion that's built into jQuery UI, right? And if I click on download, it tells you how to get it. Notice the latest version is 1.12.1. I don't have that right now, but let's get the jQuery UI stuff. And it also, you can pre-build your own. You don't have to get all of it. What if you don't need all of it? Because this is a big library now, right, of stuff. So I can certainly download it this way. So this is called jQuery Ui. And it also requires, it says stable for jQuery 1.7 and on, right? So that's the stuff that that you want to get. There's also themes. You can download themes. There used to be a theme roller for jQuery UI and a bunch of other stuff. But really, jQuery UI, what it does, if you click on the download builder, right? So I want to get everything. That's what this means. And if I go down to the bottom, if I click download, right, it's going to basically put my download inside something called jQuery-UI, right? Okay, but that would be terrible if I do that every single time. So I'd want to get it through Yarn, right? Or NPM or whatever, right? So going back to this, let's just fix this up. So I want to get jQuery UI. How do I do it? Let's see if I can get it through Yarn. I don't even know. I never use it anymore because I don't need it. I make my own, right? But let's suppose you want to make a common effect. I'm going to say yarn add, let's try jQuery-UI, and then it's going to be part of our project. So I want to see if I can get it. I don't even know if it's possible, right? I'm guessing it's called jQuery UI. Hey, there it is, jQuery UI. Done. We've got jQuery UI now. It's in, right? Now we have to add it into our project. Notice it's added 723 files. It's pretty fat, right? It's pretty big because it adds a lot of little effects, right? So let's look at that. So if I go back to my index.html, I have to include it as another library in my library inclusions. So here's my third-party libraries. I add jQuery, and somewhere after jQuery, I need to include jQuery UI, or else it won't work, right? So script, source, node modules, and then I'm going to go to jQuery UI, not jQuery, but jQuery UI, another module based on jQuery. And if you notice, it says that there is a build folder, a demos folder, a test folder, like a bunch of them, a UI folder, a themes folder. I'm just going to go to the build folder. I'm guessing that's where it is. right? Well, and that's not where it is, right? Because otherwise it'd be here. So let me go back up. It's not under build. Let's see where it would be, right? Because I mean, you have to find the code, right? It's got to be jQuery UI code. So it's got to be somewhere in here, right? Well, here's UI. I'm not sure it's there. Here's demos. Here's external. And there's the package.json file. But there is no, I can't see something that shows you jQuery UI. Let's go here to UI. UI. And this is all the, I didn't think it was going to be here. But these are all the different effects. I mean, you can download each one of them. There's core.js, the core effects. And that's not it. Might be easier for me just to look inside the code itself. I mean, again, I don't know. I don't even know where that is, right? I have to tie into it somehow. From the download also might give me a hint because I'm looking at the downloads. I just downloaded all this stuff. That's like they say date modified. There it is. And let us expand this for a second just to see where I should look, which is way at the bottom. Yeah, so it gives it to you right here in the main root. I would have to just use jQuery Ui.min.js. That's what I'm really looking for, this one, .min.js. I just don't know where it is in node modules. So jQuery Ui, and I'm looking for it here. Is external. Here's the build. How come it's not here? It should be here, right? Demos. Oh, these are all the different types you can do. Here's external. Okay, so it actually includes jQuery. Look, that's why it's so massive, because it includes jQuery again, right? So these are all the external requirements for jQuery UI. Here's my tests, right? Here's themes and different images and buttons and a bunch of stuff, but there isn't any jQuery-UI, right? Which is a real issue for me. Like, I mean, it's hard for me to recommend something that is like, okay, here's how to use it, right? And there isn't any kind of thing in here to do, right? So that is a big problem for me. I mean, I probably wouldn't download and use this thing. Let me just make sure that, I'm gonna go to demos for a second, because a lot of times in the demos for Accordion, they might have how to use it. So here's the Accordion. And that's neat, but where the heck? Oh, I see. So they have little things that they inject. So autocomplete button. Use the demos for button. And there's popper, which I don't need. But yeah, so it's got to be in here somewhere. I just don't see where it is. Maybe this is release. This is the release itself. Release.js. It's probably this one. Because this would be the release, the latest release. So this is where I'm going back and saying, meh, I don't want to use it. I'm serious, I don't want to use it. So I'm going to remove it. I'm going to do it manually this time around for the first time ever, right? I just don't like it. So I'm going to say yarn here. I'm going to say yarn remove, and then you can say jQuery -ui, right? And that'll take it out. Okay, so what that does is that you can remove and add stuff with, notice it's gone now. And then I'll just use my direct download, which kind of sucks. I don't like that. But because it's like I have to go into my downloads and grab this stuff, which is right here. And this is the jQuery UI stuff. And I only need one file for these two things. Like, so let me rename this thing. So it's not going to be called jQuery UI custom. I'm just going to call it jQuery-UI. I'm going to rename this thing to make it more palatable for me. There it is. And what I want to do is I want to take this library, which is, again, not my preference, and drag and drop it into something like my scripts. I'll make another folder in my scripts, because I'm not going to put it in node modules because it's not there. Lib. And inside my lib folder, I'm going to drag and drop to jQuery, right? That's what I would do, right? And now that I've done that, that might be easier and cleaner. So if I go here under my scripts, you can see that I got 21 files, not 700 files, right? And in my lib folder, I have jQuery, and you can see that I can tap into jQuery.min.js, which is what I want, this one. So going back to my index.html, I can say that it's under scripts, lib, and then jQuery UI, and then I want to get this one, which is jQuery UI.min.js, this one. Now they also have a theme, which I can add in to my, under Bootstrap, I can add in theming if I really want to. So I can have my own, be underneath my font awesome and before my own styles, I can add its own link. So I can say link, right? And what I want to do here is I want to say that same thing. I want to say scripts, lib, Jquery Ui, and I want to get my theme, theme.css. By the way, you can also get the minified theme if you want. I'll get the minified theme, right? And what this does is Jquery Ui theme, it actually adds theming. I can get like elements that look nice or whatever, as opposed to the basic elements. Okay, so if I did this, save everything, I saved it all, and I go back to my page, what does it do to my page? Nothing, right? Not yet. But it allows me to do things when I click. I can do special effects with the UI stuff now, right? Because I have access to this whole other library of things. Now, here's my API documentation. I can do any of these effects that are built in. So, for example, I want to do, here's some demos. Let's go to the demos. I want to do some, let's see, my button demo. So here's different button widgets, right? So I can click on a button element. And I can get these different effects if I want to do my own button. Here's a slider. So I can do this built-in slider that doesn't look like Bootstrap anymore. It's jQuery Slider, right? Some other, effect. I can do the accordion or the date picker. That might be cool. Let's do a date picker. So if I click on this, it pulls up a date picker. I don't know. Let's see if it works, right? So, and I want to view the source to kind of get an example of how that's done. Here's the source, right? That was probably done with the hide and show jQuery thing. So notice it's like really simple. It's like a function. I want to make a function. And notice what I'm doing is I'm making a function itself. So this is a way of, hey, jQuery, I want to make a function. So when it loads, this is what this is. Do a date picker. I'm targeting date picker and add a date picker on top of it. Like put a date picker object that's already exists. I didn't do anything about it, right? And based on something I click. Well, that's easy to do. So if I go back to my code, right, I can say that depending on how I do it, whether it's this way or this way. Let's use the jQuery way because we're talking about jQuery today, right? A little briefly anyway. So I don't want to do this way. This is the old HTML complicated way of doing things. Let's do it the real easy jQuery way of doing things, which is this way. And I'm making fun of it a little bit. I'm sorry. But I'm making fun because it's so easy to do, right? So I want to say something like, well, hey, when I click onto it, I also want to add a date picker. Notice I'm not getting any code hinting here. How do I get code hinting? I can add in jQuery UI with yarn. I can say yarn add at types jQuery-UI, right? And then minus dev. And what that'll do is if it finds it, which it did not, you can see it didn't find it, right? So let's try that again. Yarn add jQuery UI. Maybe I didn't have the right library either. jQuery UI and minus dev. See if that works. Yes, that worked, but it's for version 1.11. Okay, no problem. And what that did was, I'm just going to go to I'm going to try and go to the right place for you guys so you can see that it should add at types, right? Did I say add types or did I do at? Oh no, I actually added the jQuery UI library. Hey, let's see if that actually added in the one I want. I'm just curious, right? So here's jQuery UI. And hey, that's the one I wanted, not this other one that I had. That's the real one, not jQuery-UI, but jQuery UI. That's the real one. I know you're shaking your head. You're like, why? But why? Right? And then if that's the case, then I can say the same thing. I can say yarn add at types jQuery UI minus dev. And that it does work. And if I did that, just a moment. Give me 1 second. I can remove my reference in my scripts for a second. I want to kind of clean this up so I can get rid of my scripts lib now. So let's just get rid of it. So I don't have my scripts lib anymore. In a second. Don't crash. Don't crash. Oh, it's under use. It's being used right now. Delete permanently. Sure. Doesn't matter. And then what I can do is, it didn't work. What I can do is, because I'm using it, right? Sorry about that. Let's go here. going to my scripts and get rid of lib. Can I get rid of it with it still charging away? I don't think so. Yeah, I have to stop my server for a second. So let's just stop the server. I'm going to close this off for a second. There, now it's gone. And if I re-energize Visual Studio Code and put light-server, it's not going to work because I've taken away the reference, so it's going to give me an error. However, just a second, 1 sec. I will correct. Now that I have node modules in here with jQuery Ui, first of all, I didn't put it in its right place. I think I put it inside package.json. I think I put it as a dev component, and it shouldn't be. It should be up here, right? It should be up here. And what I can do, instead of like doing the remove and add, I can just cut it out of here and put it in here. I'll put it up here. I'm just listing it as a development component as opposed to here, as opposed to a dependency, which is what it's going to be now in a second. Okay, so there it is. But these two things, jQuery Ui, it gives me code hinting, and I got to connect it to my index.html. So my index.html, instead of doing it the way I did it, which is scripts, lib, I have to redo this a second. I got to go node modules now, because I found the node module that does it. Node modules, jQuery Ui, and then it's theme.min.css, that part. Just to keep it the same as everything else. That's why I did this. Because I was like, hey, I couldn't find it. Now I found it. Okay. And then node modules. And then it's jQuery Ui and min.js. There we go. So now everything is as it should be, right? That's how it should work. Now I'm not going to get any more errors. And going back to the thing I was working on, which was this one, I can do, hey, jQuery, look at this. And now I have extra stuff because I added in my stuff from my code hinting, right? And I can say I want that date picker, right? Because that's why I added the code. I'm a code hinting guy. I want to be able to, I want the API defined for me. I don't want to look it up, right? That's why I use code hinting for that, or code completion, if you will. So if you look here, I can say I want the date picker to come up, all right? So I'll press save, and I go back to my code here, and if I click this, then the date picker should come up. But where is it? That's the thing, right? So sometimes it's compatible. And notice that this big thing came up here. This something it tried to do it, right? But let me just undo that change. So far it's good, but watch this line that comes up. It's like it tries to bring something up, but it doesn't work. It might be incompatible with Bootstrap. Just being honest, right? Like it's like I'm trying to do I'm running Bootstrap, and then I'm trying to run something with from a theming perspective with the picker, right? Let's try some other things. Maybe that didn't work, but there might be other jQuery UI stuff that I can do. How about let's try the accordion one. That's kind of one that doesn't exist, and it gives you some examples code. Let's look at the source. Okay, so I can show, basically showing and hiding stuff, right? So this one is the head, and the function is like, hey, accordion, show the accordion, hide the stuff. Well, let me try and hide the whole part there. I want to hide the button, right? So if I do hide, let's try hiding the button. So if I say this dot hide, that's just built into jQuery. So that I should be able to do that. This makes the button red and then hides it really quickly. So you actually will just hide the button, right? Hide, right? And then instead of hiding, I can do an accordion. Instead of on this, I can target something else. For example, in my page, in my home HTML, I'm going to have this Jumbotron. So I'm going to find a class of Jumbotron, and I'm going to hide kind of hide the Jumbotron, or accordion the Jumbotron. Put it that way, all right? Let's try it out. Let's see if it works, right? So going back to this, I want to say that I want to kind of target a class of Jumbotron. So there's all elements with a class of Jumbotron, and I want to say that I want to do an accordion on it. All right, let's see if that works. May not. Click. Okay, that was weird. something didn't quite work out there. That was weird. It was weird, man. Kind of brought it back, but it tried, because what it's doing is it's just trying to compete with with Bootstrap styles. That's what's happening here. And to prove that out for a second, so I'm saying we can't. I'm trying to use theming that's coming from from the Jquery Ui library, and I'm trying to do something, and it did do something, but it didn't do what I expected it to do. So how would that work? Well, to test it, I could go into my index.html and temporarily disable my Bootstrap stuff just for now. So I'm going to go in here and just say I don't want to use Bootstrap, right? And it's going to look really ugly for 1 second, but then let's see what happens. So no Bootstrap, and I go back, and you can see that there's no Bootstrap, right? And if I click me, then it does change this. It themes it differently, and it changes the button too. It's not what I wanted, right? But I mean, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking probably has to do with Bootstrap or Font Awesome that's kind of connecting with, because in the Accordion UI example, like literally all they did was it said, okay, so target something that says Accordion, which is this div tag, and then add Accordion onto it. It just Accordions did the whole thing. It actually hides this whole thing, this whole section. So whatever the div tag is, as long as it's got an ID of Accordion, it'll just accordion it, right? Kind of thing. It'll make it kind of disappear, that whole section of stuff. Yeah, so that's why, like I said, we don't use that stuff anymore, because you can do a lot of this with Bootstrap and with Vanilla.js. But I wanted to talk about jQuery because it's part of your curriculum. So you can't say, hey, Tom, you never showed us jQuery. Here's jQuery. You want to use it? It's OK. I'm going to accept it. If you want to use it with your assignment 3 or the next assignment we do, assignment 4, you're welcome to use jQuery if it makes it easier for you in your life, right? I'm not going to use it because I don't need jQuery a lot of times, except for, and like I talked about before, let me just put everything back the way it was. So I'm going to get this back to normal using Bootstrap. We've already got a styling page. I don't need the theming. I'll leave the jQuery UI stuff in there if you want to use it, but I'm not going to include it in my own code. Same thing goes with my, I wonder if the theme messed it up too. Let me try just doing it that way. So I kind of got rid of the theming, but I want to do my accordion. Yeah, it won't even work. And I want to kind of get rid of the jQuery UI piece right here, but it's there. It's inside your code. It's part of a library now that it's inside if you wanted to use some pieces of it, right? So if I go down to here, I don't care about using my Jumbotron anymore or using jQuery. And I'm going to go into here, into my code. These are all the changes I made. I'm going to kind of add these things in there. I'm going to say added jQuery UI. So that's all I did. UI. Now you can have that up on your GitHub if you want to have that. Okay, cool. So, but why do I want to use jQuery? Well, we talked about it briefly when we started talking about AJAX, right? jQuery is really cool and quick to use when you want to do something more complex with AJAX. And that's why people use it, because, again, if I go jQuery get, all right, I can use a bunch of different things for using AJAX with the text, HTML, and val. There's some really cool things you can do here. Here's AJAX itself. So if I use load, the load method actually loads HTML, right? It's a shortcut of $.get, like we showed you last time, right? So if you look at load, it says, hey, take stuff from a particular location and dump it into this location. It's like a one-liner. Like, that's a beautiful thing, right? And a good example of that is if I wanted to take the information we already have. So I said, okay, when I'm not gonna use this click button anymore, and let's just get rid of all this. So I don't need that. Was just my example. Oh. Hey, I want to target when I'm done. I want to target my some object as an example. I want to target the Jumbotron. Let's see if that even exists. Oh, it exists. I want to target, let's make an area here. So I'll make a paragraph tag. In my paragraph tag, I'll give it an ID here of extra nav. There we go. So in my paragraph, I'm going to put this. In fact, I won't do a paragraph. I'll do a div tag just to make it easy, because that's just the better way to do it. So I'm going to put a div tag with an ID of extra nav. Here's my extra nav. And I want to dump in here the same nav bar as the main nav bar. I want to dump in the nav bar in there, right? So I can, the way I can do this is, why did I do that? I can target extra nav. So I can say, hey, let's look at extra nav, all elements that have extra nav in them. And then I can say, well, guess what? I want to load, and what am I loading? A URL. And I can say that I want to load that place that's going to come from views, and then content, and then my partials. And I want to put in my header.html again. One line, right? So if this works well, if I did it right, then you'll see in my home an extra nav bar, and it didn't work. Why? Oh yeah, because I'm using it in within. Let me see. Am I targeting it right? Let me just make sure that this is working properly. Sorry, I am using AJAX, so it does do really weird, funny effects when I'm putting AJAX within AJAX, which is what I'm trying to do here. I'm saying, hey, when the thing finishes loading, then I'm targeting on something called extra nav, right? Extra nav is here. Did I save it? Oh, that's in my home. In my home, extra nav, in my ID. Okay, cool. And here's my click me button that appears. And let me just make sure I save this. And again, AJAX has funny ways of working. Let's make sure that to see what I get. So if I inspect or view page source, first of all, will only show me these things, right? So I won't see it here. Well, let's do a couple of tests. Again, whenever you try and do something, it's like to test that if it works. And I'll make my little button work again, but I'll make it work so it targets this extra nav stuff. So I'll say something like, maybe views partials header.html isn't the right place. Did I call it that? Views partials header.html. Yeah, that's where it's supposed to come from, right? That's where I'm loading. I'm using the load event. And the load event, if you notice what it says load data from the server and place return HTML into the matched element. That's what it's supposed to do. So I'm supposed to get it, and whatever the match element happens, it loads it in there, right? I'm just wondering if it's happening asynchronously again, because I'm using AJAX. Here's AJAX, and I'm putting AJAX inside AJAX. Woo, that's bad, right? And I'm wondering if I have to do this somewhere else, but that might be the reason. But let's just target this with a button. So I'll say something like, hey, jQuery, get a button. My button is the click me button. So I'm going to get the click me button. When the click me button's on the screen, I want to do the click events. I can also do on. That's the other one. Instead of on, I can do a special event with jQuery called on, and the type of event is click. I can do it this way as well, instead of .click. This way you can make multiple events. Click is a very common one, so they include it, .click, right? As opposed to .onClick, same thing, right? And then I can say, well, then here's my function that I'm going to detail. I actually believe that's this way, yeah. Let me just make sure I'm doing it right, because there might be a different way of doing it this way. Hold on a second. When I do the onClick, and then the callback handler, yeah, it is. And then if I do the callback handler, just like before, I can target that extra nav. So I can say, hey, look at the extra nav, and in the extra nav, and you can say that dot, I believe, text. I can say that put hello to see if I can get that extra nav area. When I click on the button, I'm going to put a little piece of hello inside the div tag. That's what's going to happen. And no. So I'm saying you have to test it before you can do this. If I can't get my button to work. So let's see why. Does it actually click? Console.log. Clicked. Again, I'm also showing you debugging techniques that I would use really quickly if I was going to do something like this, right? I mean, I think it's important for you to know some of the same things that we've been doing all along. And there might be some other reason why that's happening. Let's look at inspect. And let's go into console. I'm good. Click me. Clicked. That's good. So the click, that worked. But it's not finding the nav div tag, right? Which is weird. So let's go into the home.html. Home.html is loading extra nav, right? And it's not being able to find that extra nav ID. Why wouldn't it? Let's go back to app.js. Make sure I spelled it properly. Extra nav with a $. Extra nav, text hello. It doesn't go in there. And let's do it the old way. So I'm going to say something like, I don't know, document dot. I can do vanilla JavaScript here too. Get element by ID extra nav. You didn't trust jQuery. Dot, and then you can say inner text or text contents. This is just using vanilla JavaScript is equal to hello. That's the same as what I did before with the text. Click. That worked. Oh yeah. Oh, this is what I want to do. So okay, fine. So then my selector somehow, the other selector with jQuery wasn't really finding extra nav somehow, right? So this works. It actually exists on the page. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do this. So that's weird. Okay, la la la. So okay, I want to find extra nav. I did before extra nav. I click the click me button, and I want to say that I want to add my CSS. For the CSS, what you can do is you can change properties, whatever property you want to change. For example, background color. Background color. You can change the background color of the property name, and then the value that you want to add in for the CSS for extra nav. I'll make it red. In jQuery, that's how you do it. So when I click on it, the background color will be red. But there isn't any size to it. Right now, I haven't styled it in any way. Maybe I'll do it. I just want to show you that it's there. So I want to kind of go into my app, and I'll say, I'll target anything that has background nav. Oh, sorry, extra nav. That's what I called it. And I'll put the min dash height. I'll make it so that it is, I don't know, 40 pixels or something. Right? Dash height, yeah, 40 pixels. And then if I go back, yeah, there's a little bit of a space there. And then what I can do is, this doesn't work. It's not being able to find extra nav. And I can make it so that I can use an actual object. I can say, there's another way of doing it. So I can say, let's extra nav equal to that. Hey, jQuery, get extra nav. I want to get that element, the first element with extra nav, right? And let's print it out, console.log. Extra nav, let's see if I can get that. When I click onto it, I don't care about the click. I know this one works, so I'll take that away. Again, troubleshooting 101, right? How do I find my extra nav and show it on the console, right? And click away. It's good, right? Finds it nicely. I know it's there. I'm targeting it nicely now. Yeah, okay, fine. I'll do it this way. So now my extra nav, now that it's a jQuery, notice what I get also if I hover over it. It's a HTML element when I did it this way. So I can't do it what I want to do, which is the .text or .load, right? I can't do that. But what if I'm targeting it this way and I am getting it, I am finding it, can I do this? Let's get rid of this. Load, right? Because that would load that first kind of thing of extra nav, and no. Find load of undefined because it's trying to find extra nav, but it doesn't exist. It doesn't find. Hasn't found extra nav somehow, but it found it here. Let's try that. That should work. But I can't do this because the load works on the actual element itself. Anyways, there you go. But that's the way I'm telling you, this is the way to use a jQuery. And the reason why you use it is because it's so easy to use, but you can't, once I do this, I make it from jQuery into something else, right? But yeah, but the great thing is that if I want to use the .get, like I showed you before, for AJAX, so what I used jQuery for, that didn't work for me, guys. I'm so sorry. I'll figure out why later. I'm just running out of time, and I've got other things to show you. But what I really wanted to do is show you that other stuff, which is the jQuery stuff that you can do for $.get. And $.get gives you the URL. We did this before, where you can set up your own AJAX call with $.get. And instead of sending all that XHR stuff, it just does it for you. I showed you that last day. That's one reason why I use it. You can also do the low-level call, which is .ajax. And .ajax takes a bunch of settings, like, for example, URL and stuff, inside of a parameters array, right? Or parameters object, I mean. So if I go back to the documentation online, and if I look at jQuery for AJAX, right? So remember, you can do AJAX itself with the low-level call. I want to see if they have it here. They don't. You have to go to the jQuery website, so jQuery.com. If you go to jQuery, and if you look at the API documentation for the AJAX stuff, which is up here, and here's the low-level interface for AJAX. And if you look at here, jQuery AJAX, then you can see that, for an example, if you say $.ajax, what you can do is you can put in your own parameters with a parameter array, a parameter object. This is the parameter object, right? And there's some other examples down here that I saw earlier. So the URL is whatever it is. And you can also, if it goes further down, you can specify things like the URL, the XHR fields, and a bunch of other things that you can target, as well as say, when I'm done, when AJAX is done, then do something, which is kind of like the complete function or the load function when it's done, right, of the jQuery that's built into JavaScript, you know, kind of. So there it is. So AJAX, look for this particular URL, and when I'm done, do something. That's what it does. That's how you can use the low-level AJAX call. But typically, what I use is $.get and $post. Those two methods, if I'm going to use AJAX at all, right? But you can literally put in your method. So AJAX, what kind of method I'm using, post or get. URL, this is the low-level call. Any kind of data, here's the data that I'm going to push to the server in this particular case, right? And then what happens when I'm done? The .done is how jQuery works. So very, very simple way of using jQuery, and I like it. And a lot of times when I'm in a rush, instead of writing all my XHR object and all that kind of stuff, $.get, the URL, and you know, kind of the function callback, and I'm good to go. Like, it's literally that simple. One more reason why we use jQuery is the $.ready. Okay, so I didn't show you that one. Let's go back here. So AJAX is one reason, and the other reason is we use this IFI, right? Here's the IFI function, right? Well, what you can do is with AJAX, with jQuery, you can put, I can write this differently, right? I'm not going to mess up my files, but I'm going to make a new file in core called jQuery. So I'm going to say a new file. We'll call it jQuery test.js. And inside there, I can say a $.ready, right? And the ready handler, what it does is it waits for the DOM to be ready, which is equivalent to doing my IFI. That's what it does. So when it's ready, do a handler. So on ready, then do something. And this is equivalent to doing this, the IFI. For the most part, this is kind of the same. So this and this, same, right? And so people look at this and they go, well, this makes more sense now, because $.ready means wait for the thing to be ready and then do something, which is what we've been doing the whole time, right? I personally think this is okay too, if you know the syntax. However, I have to admit in this case that I don't know if one or the other is any better, because this one is really confusing for people. When they look at this, they're like, whoa, what the heck is that, right? $.ready makes more sense, right? So this is the jQuery $.ready, right? And then when it's ready, you can do other stuff inside there like you normally can. Like you can put another you can say, well, I'm going to target my click me button, right? And when I'm in my click me button, right, then on click, do something, right? Here's my function to do something. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with also using ES6 arrow functions where I want to add do something that looks like this, right? And that's the ES6 way of using, kind of combining jQuery with ES6, right, to do something, and then whatever that's going to be, right? So that's kind of an example of the iffy. This part here is like doing this, right? And then inside here, doing something like, okay, document.getElement by ID. I'm looking at the ID, which is called click me button, right? And I want to add an event listener, right? That is of type click. And I want to do a function that does all this, do something. So you can see that in this case, I would say that JavaScript is more verbose, right? That's the thing. So there's the two forms, it's pretty much the same thing, right? One form just has the ready and the $, and the other one is the old way we're used to. So both forms are kind of equivalent. Okay, questions around jQuery. That's it for jQuery. I'm not touching jQuery again. All right, I'm telling you this because I don't want you to ever look at it and go, Tom never showed me jQuery, and Tom shows you jQuery. That's all you need to know about jQuery, in my opinion. Right? I don't use it very often. I'd rather use vanilla JS. I can get a lot more done with it. And it's, I mean, for me, I find that I don't need to load a big library. I don't trust what the library is going to do. I know what I can do with you can see that I can access the document no problem my way. jQuery, I got to look at the the API documentation and see where it's not working properly, how it connects to the other thing. I've got more control with JavaScript. I'm going to put this in here. I'm not going to delete it, and when I put it up on GitHub, it'll be there as an example, and I'll put in there. So this will be the jQuery way, and this would be the JavaScript way. Right, and kind of like vanilla JavaScript, I would say, vanilla JavaScript kind of way. Right, there's nothing. I'm not using anything there. Well, maybe this isn't vanilla anymore because of the arrow function. Right, but close enough. All right, so jQuery's done. So I've talked about jQuery and AJAX. One of the things that we wanted to kind of do is, I'm going to get back into my app.js for now, is last day, and this is where I'll end today, is I wanted to load up this data file from JSON. And this is part of the project, assignment number 3 you need to kind of do. So what I did was I kind of said that I had this other load JSON function that I made. And what this function is going to do for us, this is what I made it, is this function loads a JSON file. And basically what it does is it and dumps it into the address book, right? This address book here, which is, if you notice, address book is just a variable. It's a container, right? That's all it does, address book container. So that's what it did. That's what it does, right? So address book now has everything that's inside of the JSON file. And if you notice, in my case, the JSON file is loosely on our in our page. So I have my data.json. Here's my data.json, and it just dumps all this information inside of that file, right? Inside of the address book container, right? And if you look at it, the data.json has a context array, and the context array is an array of contexts. And I created last day, I created a context in my objects. I have a contacts class, right? And the contact has name, number, and email, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm using the contact class itself to create contacts, more than one contact, or an array of contacts. And then what I can do is inside of my app.js, after my file loads, this loads the data from the file. This would be equivalent to what you have to do for your assignment 3. You use the load JSON or something like this to load your data, your paragraph.json file into some kind of container. In this case, I'm using address book. You would call it paragraphs. All right?
So we make a paragraph like that.
Yeah, so inside of what you'd have to do for yourself is in your data.json, or in your case, it's going to be called paragraphs.json. That's what I asked you to do in your assignment. You would create a bunch of paragraphs in here, right? And each paragraph, you could actually name the paragraph if you wanted. You can say paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, paragraph 4, paragraph 5, whatever you want, right? And then you take that paragraph and you inject it in, right? Yes.
Is it necessary to name it as paragraphs?
No.
Because, like, for example, I have the project skills, so I can name them.
You can name them whatever you want. I'm leaving it to you how you format your data file. Your data file is your data file. If you want to call it paragraphs, or if you want to call it your project, you want to call it something else that's more contextual, it's up to you. Yeah. Yeah.
Containing context. Is it possible to include more than one type of person, like context and addresses?
Yes. So I would do a comma, and if I say something like, so I'm under my context, I could add another thing that has something else. So if I say something like addresses, like you said, right? And my addresses was another array, I could do that, right? So an array of, yeah. Yeah, in the main curly braces is your entire data object, right? And inside the data object, you can have more than one array or other objects, right? So for example, instead of this, if I wanted to make an object instead of an array, I can do that. I can say it's an object, right? So the object and in this addresses object, I can remember I don't have to make it an array. I made it an array because it's an array of contacts. It's contextual, right? But I don't have to do that. I can say addresses. I can say this is address 1, right? So I can say address 1 and then have some kind of property of address 1, which is, I don't know, 941 progress, right? Right? Or I can say instead of address 1, I can call it school address, centennial address, right? So address is centennial, 9414. I mean, you can put whatever you want. And notice it's not erroring out. It's not giving me an error because this addresses object is next to the context array, right? You can put whatever kind of details you want here in your JSON file, right? Yes. But then you have to access them somehow. And that's the thing that you have to figure out, because you're building a custom loader or a parser for your object. Okay, so that's what you have to do. You have to parse your object after you make your object, like in JSON format. You have to read it in somehow, right? So that's the challenge. The challenge is in this case because we have an array, right? When we go back into our app.js. So first we read this stuff into a variable called address book. The variable is just a container, right? So that's the first part. And then inside of our method, in our main method, you can see that I'm inserting HTML, I'm setting the page content, and then I load JSON. And when I'm done, I'm waiting for the event listener to finish, right? So I'm on load, right? You can also do complete when JSON is complete. You can also create your own event if you want. But we're not doing that. We're saying addressbook.context, because context is an array, I can use a for each loop. Because I know that context exists inside of address book. I know that it does, right? Because I made it that way. If I look at my JSON file, and let's just for purposes of what we're doing, I'm just going to split the screen for a second. So I'm going to kind of put on this side. I'm going to put the data.json on one side. Actually, I'll put it the other way. Here's my app.js, and this side will be data.json.
So if it contains composite data, we need kind of custom parser.
Hold on. Give me a sec. So I can answer your question. It's not doing what I'm asking it to do, right? I wonder if I can move this over here. I can, yeah. Yeah, so data.json on this side. This is app.js on this side. So you notice that this is the data file portion, and this part right here is my file. So you can see that address book contacts, it's looking in the context array. That's what it's doing. That's what this part is. Address book is just a variable, right? And it's the container for everything I load in. So it represents this part, right? Because these curly braces, it's the address book is an object, right? And this object contains a context array. an array called contacts, right? And inside the context array, I have multiple contacts, each contact, 1, 2, 3 in this particular case. And what I'm doing is I'm looping through. I'm saying for each contact inside the contacts array, I want to create a new contact based on my class, objects.contact, right? And I'm passing in some data. I'm just going to put this on multiple lines so you can see it. A contact name, contact number, contact email, right? So this data is moving into this new object called new contact, right? And what I'm doing is I have a contacts array, which I just defined up here. So I said contacts, this contacts variable, right? And what I'm doing is I'm pushing on to this contacts variable, this new contact. Now, funny enough, this works. And one of the things that would bug me about this, if I was you, right, is, wait a minute, when did I ever send up contacts, this one here, this contacts, as an array or an object? And I never did down there. But I think what I'd like to do is put it in here. Notice I put my contacts down here in my start method. I define contacts as an array type already, right? And that's how I was able to load it. So now this case, it's an array of any. We don't know what kind of array. It could be an array of any kind, right? Any container. And then what I'm doing is I'm loading in, I'm pushing, I'm using the push method that's built into all arrays to push my new contact onto the array. That's what I'm doing. I'm actually adding it on. And again, there's two ways I could have done this. I could have said that for every new contact, I could use a for loop instead of a for each loop. This is just a for each loop I'm using, but I could use a for loop for every contact in the array. I could basically count how many there are, contacts, right? I could count them, and then after I count them, I know how much they are. And the way to know that is, if I wanted to print out my address book, so when I'm done loading, on load, I want to show my address book. Let's see my whole address book, what it looks like. So I can say something like console.log, and I'll just use a backtick for my template string, and I'll say address book. And then we'll use the template string to inject the address book in there. So address book. And then we'll see what it looks like on the console, right? So we're loading in stuff from here. And then what are we getting? Let's get rid of jQuery. What are we getting in here? Well, we're getting this. It's an address book of objects, an array of objects. That's what it says, right? Notice I can't do anything with it, right? Because it's a address book itself has loaded something. It says object, right? Even if I refresh the screen, it doesn't really give me access to this right now because it's an array. It's kind of an object of arrays, or that has an array inside of it, right? That's what this does. And if I go one further, if I say address book dot contacts, right, by this, now I should have access to it. If I did this, and if I go back, you can see now that my address book has an object, another object, and another object, right? That's funny, right, that it did that for me, right? And it did it right from here, right? So I'm showing you this because each of my contacts doesn't show this, right? Because each of my contacts is an object, right? So if I said, well, I want to look at, how about contacts 0, right? Okay, let's see what it gives me now. Contact 0. Well, wait a minute. It says class lists, uncut type name, class list of null. Where did this come from? app.js132. Oh, I messed something up. Let's undo that change. That was weird. That didn't do what I expected it to do. Yeah, what I'd have to probably do is do what I normally do, which is like let my contacts be an address book contacts 0, the first contact in the address book, right, which is an object. That's what it would be, right? And then I would say my contacts in here. That's weird. My contacts. I might have done something wrong. Anyways, same thing, right? I'm just injecting. So now you can see that it says address book 0. It's going to give me an object, whatever the object is. I don't have access to it. I can't see it. Yeah, I still can't see it. But here I can. And the reason why is because as I'm looping through, I'm looking through each of the contexts, right? So if I said, okay, what if I wanted to say my contact or contact number 1, let's call this, instead of my contacts, we'll rename this to contact 0, right? Contact 0. Contact 0. And I want to say the name of contact 0, so contact 0 name, right, is equal to contacts 0 dot name. Can I do that? Can I get my name out of there, right? And yes. Right? So that's how you access it. It's there, it's buried, and you have to know how to load in your file, right? Notice that the first few times I did it didn't work because I'm not getting into the data. In order for me to get the data, I have to go into the actual name. And that's how I did contact name, contact number, and contact email. And what I did was I decoupled the properties, right, from my JSON object, each JSON object, and I injected them somewhere where I could use them, right? So now I have an array of contacts. That's what I've done, an array of contacts that I've pushed each contact into, all right? Okay, cool. What I want to do now, before we go, I have 10 minutes. I don't know if I can do it in 10 minutes, but I'll try. If not, tomorrow, right? That's why I said I don't know if I can have time for Node.js. What I want to do is, now that I have this, I don't want to print this out every single time. I have this contacts array, right? And in my contacts array, in my page, which is going to be now my new page that I'm going to put in my contacts page, right? I want to inject new pieces of my DOM in there into my new contacts page. So, okay, let's just get rid of this side for a second. And if I go to what I'm talking about, so just to get you to understand what my scope is for today and for tomorrow, minimum. This is the minimum of what I want to try and do, all right? If I look at my content inside my contact.html, I just have this jumbotron that says contact us. Let's change this, instead of contact us, to my contacts. Okay. My contacts. And what I want to do here is inside the jumbotron, right, or below the jumbotron or something like that. So inside my container, though, I want to put a div tag with the class of row, right? And inside my div tag with the class of row, right, I'm going to put a new row of kind of like a table, if you will. And if I look at the table example from my get bootstrap, let's take a look at get bootstrap. So I want to try and do this, right? So here's my documentation, and I want to look at my content. So here's my components, and components has a bunch of stuff, but I think it's under content, under tables. And if you look under tables, there's this table example, right? And what it does is it says, hey, here's my table, a class of table, and here's my head, the head of my table with some stuff, right? And inside the head, I also have a body, right? So I can start structuring my stuff this way. So it looks like how it does now. Row 1, scope is row 1, row 2, row 3, and so on. And they give you some other examples. For example, a class of table-dark, some head options where they give you a class of table with the head is dark, right? But the body is different. And they give you some really cool examples. I want to do this one, something like these striped rows, right? But I want to start off with a table of class of table and a table stripe. So I need that kind of setup. But I also want to put another div tag in there to give me some room. I don't want to take up the whole entire page. I want to take up something like, I don't know, maybe like 6. So column dash medium dash 6. So kind of 6 columns that I want inside of there, right? And inside these 6 columns, I want a table with a class of table, if I'm not wrong. It says table, and then table striped. So that's the class. That's the table itself. Inside the table, I need a table head, right? So T head. And inside my table row, I want to have the name the, because I have my name, right? In my package, data.json, I have name, number, and email right now, right? So I want to have name, number, and email. That's what I want to have, right? So going back to that, and this should be inside of my contacts .html page, which is here. So in my table head, I want a bunch of TRs, right, or THs, if you will. These are all the columns. So TH, and I can say multiplied by 3, right? That's using Emmet again. And if I did that, I have these, right? And you notice that I can also add a scope object. So I can say that each one of these objects has a scope, right? A scope object, which is row. And notice it just shows you this. That's what it's going to look like right now, right? And if I go here to on the edge, so if I type this, I can actually click this and it'll do that. If it's going to work, if I click onto this, it'll do it for all of them. So scope row, 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 right? Just like it shows here. Or in other words, instead of scope row, I can say scope column, which is what it should be. There's my column. This is exactly what I'm doing here. Scope column, 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 right? And then each one of these, the first one will be the number, whatever that is. I don't know the number yet. And I don't need 3, I actually need 4. I need 4. So number, I need the name, I need the contact number, if I'm not wrong, and an email. So contact number and an email. That's my row. And that's just the head of my row. All right, the head of my row is going to look like this. Okay, and if I was to look at it right now, what I got, if I go to home and if I go to contact, then I have this. Doesn't really do what I want it to do yet. It's not formatted properly, right? For jQuery. Sorry, for Bootstrap. jQuery is my head, sorry. So this is the first part. Column dash medium dash 6 is my class. Is my table, class table, table striped, right? Did I not put it back? I did, for sure. All right, and that again. Yeah, that shouldn't be this way. And let's take a look at this. I'm not finished. That's why. And then I need my table body. And if I was to take some examples from my table body, so I'm just going to grab this piece here, right, just to kind of finish off my table body, and then I'll add it in. Bear with me. So I'm going to kind of go into my contact. So this is the table. And what did I do wrong? Table head. Oh, that's why. Haha. Undo. Table head that contains 3 of these. That's what I wanted to. That's why it didn't work out. I wanted to do this. And then I need a table body, T body, right? And the table body is going to be where I have my stuff, right? And this is where inside of the table body element, I'm going to inject my table rows, right? So if I was to see what this looks like right now, we should be able to see that when I go to contact, I get this. That's what it looks like right now, right? And why? Because I actually need 4, not 3. Let's just get this. So here's 4. And again, I'll complete this with you guys tomorrow. But here's my number, again, my name. And I want to put inside my name, I'm also going to put in, we said contact number. And there's also a email address. Those are the columns, right? So again, if I go here and I go contact, you can see now that I have this. This doesn't look to be big enough. So instead of column medium 6, we'll say column medium 8. Let's see how that looks. Right? That's better, right? So, and if I want it bigger, like and notice it's already starting to look like a table, right? So I want to put in maybe I don't know, 10, not the whole 12, but part of it. I gotta kind of put in everything so it fits. Okay, so there's my name, contact number, and email address. Yay. And what I want to do is I'm going to inject all my table rows in here. Inject my table rows. And the way to do that is to build up the DOM elements by creating my element, create element, each one of my elements I want for each of my contacts. For each contact, I want to target, right, my T body, element, right? For each, see my thinking, right? So now when I do my for each loop, I have a for each loop, right? And I can do that if I look inside my core in my app.js, I have this for each loop. Here's my for each loop. So not only am I pushing my contacts, I could do this, right? But right in here, I could target, my contact, my T body, right? So again, what I want to try and do is, I want to do this once, right? I don't want to do it more than one time, and I want to do it on load, right? So I can say something like, let T body equal to, again, document.query selector, and then T body, right? And what this is going to say is, hey, give me the first time you see T body in my page. Remember, there's only one page. There isn't multiple pages here. I'm using a single page application to target my body, right? So this is the first part. And if I go back, you can see that there's no error, right? And I'm actually targeting the body of this, which exists on the contact page. Okay. So that's one thing to note. That's what it's doing. So it's targeting my body. And what I want to do here is I want to append child to my body. For every one of them, I want to append child to TR. But first, I need to create a new item. So I'm going to say that let TR, right, equal to a, I want to create. Remember how we did the document.create element? And I can target which one I want. I want a TR. That's what I want, a table row. That's what my table row element is. Okay, I haven't added it to the DOM yet. And if I look at my my bootstrap, I need to create a table row, right? And each of the table rows need to have table data for each of the rows. Table data, table data, table data, this kind of thing, right? I need 4 of them, right? 1 for each element that I read, right? Now I also have the first one, which is the element number, right? Like, for example, element 0, element 1, element 2, right? And I can create a counter if I want. Like, I can say something like let counter, right? And I can say I can kind of initialize that to 0 because I'm using a for each. I could use a for loop, and then I would have the counter built in, right? And I could say something like for the first element that I want. So I could say let TD1, right? So my first piece of table data that I'm putting in here, or a table TH. I can say that let TH, right, equal to a new document dot create element, and then it's a TH, right? Wow. Right? And then I can configure it because I want to add a scope of row, right? So I can say that so th dot and I want to set attribute, right? I can set attribute of scope, and I can set it to, like it says here, row. Right, so I've built up my table head, or this table thing with a row, and I can also set the th dot text content equal to my counter, right? Because counter right now would start off with 0, right? So the 0th element, okay? And that's the first one. And then I want to do for each of the, and this is for each of the elements, right? But for each of the elements, I'm going to do this. I'm going to set this up. And then I'm going to set up TD inside my for loop, my for each loop. I'm going to set up a for loop. So I'm going to say a for loop. So a for loop is like this, right? I know I'm running overtime. These people are waiting for me. But I'm going to say that for every count of the, I'm going to set up 3, right? So I only have 3 elements right now, right? I'm making it so it's like this, right? So for the 3 elements that I want, I'm going to set that let TD, right? Let TD, and it's kind of funny. I got to add the table header first to the table to the TR. So I'm going to say something like tr.add child or append child th. So I add that in, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for every TD it's going to be equal to, again, a new create element. So create element, document dot create element. I know you guys are killing. I'm killing it with this thing, but I'm going to go over it again tomorrow, right? And the element that I'm going to add in is a TD, table data, right? And the TD dot maybe I can't do it this way. So I'm doing it for each of the items in my object. And then I'm cycling through each of the things, right? Yeah, probably not going to be able to do it this way. I'm probably not going to be able to do it this way. Guys, I need 2 more minutes, and then I'll do it the other way. So I'll say TD1. We'll call this TD1 for now. And I'll make it nicer tomorrow. Okay, so TD1 dot, and I want to say that text content, right, is equal to the contact dot name, right? And then I'll do the same thing for the other ones. Bear with me. I know it's kind of duplication, but it's slightly different in that it would be more difficult for me to make it the other way around. So TD2, TD3, and then I have these 3 table datas, right? But one is name, the other one is number, and the last one is email. And then what I want to do is, as I make them, I add them. So I say tr dot append child TD1, and then I'm going to tr. I'm going to make this a little nicer tomorrow with a loop. I just don't have time right now. And so it adds in these elements. So basically what I'm doing is I'm creating all the elements that I'm adding into the rows, right? And then what I'm going to do is, after I get this in, I'm going to add the whole the tr itself is going to be added into the to the t body. So t body dot. So for each one of these, I'm going to say that t body dot append child. And I'm probably not going to work because I'm doing it all at once. TR. Right? Because what I'm doing is I'm taking that table row and I'm putting it onto the table body at the end. Right? Let's see if this works. So yeah, I can always see there's an issue, right? Because it says cannot read append child of null on 109, right? So t-body.append child, I'm trying to do that. And it's giving me this error because when I go back to t-body, which is up here, t-body, right? I'm trying to append child down here. This. I'm trying to append, and this should work actually. t-body.append child each of the rows. That should totally work. But we'll fix it tomorrow, right? Because we're totally out of time. But that's what this should do. So I'm building up my DOM. I'm building it up here, and then I'm spitting it into my file. That's what I'm doing, right? And what it should be is when I go to this and I click contacts, then I'm going to have all my contacts appear down here. That's what it should happen. But I'm having this error, which I'll fix tomorrow. Questions? All right. That's it for me, guys. Tomorrow we'll continue with this, it looks like. And then if I have time to start Node, I will. But if I probably won't. It looks like I won't. I'm probably be stuck with this stuff, which is totally fine. All right. We'll see you tomorrow.